Ladies and gentlemen, I believe you didn't show up here by accident. You're not here just to hear another speech or be temporarily inspired. No, I believe this moment is a divine appointment. Something inside of you is stirring something powerful, something bold, something ready to break free. You see, God didn't create you to stay stuck in the same cycles, rehearsing the same excuses, replaying the same story. There is a greater version of you waiting to be discovered. That old version, the one tied to fear, failure, shame, doubt, that version has expired. And it's time now, not someday, but today, to force yourself to grow beyond it. Don't let the past define you. Don't let where you've been talk you out of where you're going. You've been created with purpose, wrapped in potential, and filled with seeds of greatness. But growth doesn't come by staying comfortable. Destiny requires discomfort. You're going to have to stretch, leave behind what's familiar, and press forward into the unknown. Yes, the old you might be safe, predictable, even accepted by others, but the new you, the one God has called and anointed, is powerful beyond measure. That version of you carries the answers, the influence, the impact that this world needs right now. So get ready. Because when you dare to outgrow the old version of yourself, you don't just evolve, you awaken. You don't just change, you align. You don't just grow, you step boldly into your God-given purpose. You can't step into a new season carrying an old mindset. Too often we ask for new opportunities, we pray for change, we dream about the next level, but we try to bring along the same thinking that kept us stuck in the last one. That's not how transformation works. God wants to do something new in your life, but He's waiting for you to think on a new level. You can't see new doors if your eyes are still focused on old windows. The old mindset is like a worn-out filter. It distorts everything you see, everything you believe, and everything you reach for. If you carry that filter into the new season, even your blessings will look like burdens, and opportunities will feel like obstacles. That's why the battle is not out there, it's in here, in the way you think, the way you process, the way you respond to the world around you. You may have grown up in a place where lack was normal, where fear was the language, where nobody dared to dream beyond survival. That mindset may have helped you cope back then, but it won't help you build what God is calling you to build now. You have to renew your thinking. You have to tell yourself, just because it was this way doesn't mean it has to stay this way. That old version of you that accepted limitations, that settled for less, that allowed insecurity to lead, that version cannot go where you're headed. It's time to update your internal software, to stop letting expired beliefs run your system. Because no matter how talented you are, no matter how big your dreams are, your life will never rise higher than the way you think. Your mindset is a thermostat. It sets the temperature for your entire life. And you can't live a life of purpose with a mind stuck in patterns of doubt, regret, and fear. The Word says, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Not by changing your circumstances, not by fixing everyone around you, but by allowing God to change the way you think. That means being willing to challenge what you've always believed. It means being brave enough to say, maybe that belief served me once, but it no longer aligns with who I'm becoming. It's not just about letting go of negative thinking, it's about replacing it with truth, with faith, with God's promises. Sometimes the hardest part about growing is not what you need to learn, it's what you need to unlearn. You have to unlearn that you're not good enough. You have to unlearn that you'll always struggle. You have to unlearn that your value comes from people's approval. Those lies might have been planted in childhood, spoken over you in moments of pain, reinforced by years of rejection, but they are not your identity. They are not your truth. And as long as you allow them to remain, they will block you from stepping into the identity God has placed within you. A new season requires a new lens. When you begin to see yourself the way God sees you, capable, chosen, empowered, you stop disqualifying yourself. You stop shrinking back. You stop comparing your journey to someone else's highlight reel. The old mindset says, play it safe. The new mindset says, faith it forward. The old mindset says, you're not ready. The new mindset says, God equips those He calls. When you change your mindset, you start walking differently. speaking differently, believing differently. And that difference creates a shift in your direction. You may have gone through seasons that made you doubt, seasons that made you small, but God will use even those seasons to fertilize the soil of your mind if you let Him. What the enemy meant to bury you, God can use to grow you. But the choice is yours. Will you keep dragging the old mindset into the new place? Or will you draw a line in the sand and say, that was then, this is now? The miracle you're waiting for may already be in motion, but it's waiting on your agreement. Heaven is waiting on your alignment, and that alignment begins in your thinking. Because when your mind gets in position, your life starts catching up. Doors begin to open. Favor begins to follow. Purpose begins to unfold. Not because something outside changed first, but because you changed how you think. You decided that the old mindset could no longer drive the vehicle. You realize that new seasons demand new strategies, new language, new confidence, new perspective. And it all starts with letting go of what no longer serves where you're headed. You begin to understand that fear was only powerful because you believed it. That limitation only held you because you agreed with it. But when you shift your agreement to truth, you shift your reality. The chains start to fall in your mind before they ever fall in your life. That's where the true freedom begins in the unseen. In the internal, in the decision to release outdated narratives and embrace divine possibilities. Comfort may feel safe, but growth lives in the stretch. The human spirit was never designed to stay still. You were not created to stay in the shallow end of life, doing the same things, thinking the same thoughts, living in the same routines. There is a divine dissatisfaction that stirs within you when you're called to more. And yet, comfort whispers to you, stay where it's predictable. Don't risk the unknown. Don't reach too far. It tells you that average is acceptable, that familiar is enough, that stability is better than possibility. But the problem is, comfort zones are also stagnation zones. Nothing new can be born in a space where nothing changes. Nothing extraordinary can rise in a life ruled by the ordinary. There are moments in life when the desire to grow comes face to face with the fear of letting go. That's when the stretch begins. Growth stretches your thinking, your faith, your habits, your identity. It pulls you out of the limited mindset that says, this is all I can do, and into the divine reality that says, you haven't even scratched the surface. The stretch is uncomfortable, but it is holy ground. It's where you meet the best version of yourself, the version God already sees, the version hidden beneath years of settling, silencing, and self-doubt. But to meet that version, you have to move. You have to be willing to leave the shore and step into the deep waters where your legs can't touch, where you're no longer in control, but where faith becomes your foundation. Comfort rarely demands anything from you, but purpose will challenge everything in you. Your growth will not ask for permission. It will interrupt your patterns, disrupt your routines, and stir up your fears, not to break you, but to build you. But when it starts, you'll have a choice. Resist the stretch or embrace it. Many people settle not because they lack potential, but because they refuse to be stretched. They say, it's too hard, it's too late, or what if I fail? But stretching is not a sign you're failing, it's a sign you're forming. Like a seed breaking through the soil, it's messy, it's unfamiliar, and it's uncomfortable, but it's necessary. If you stay too long in the place where you've already mastered everything, where there's no challenge, no discomfort, you begin to shrink inside. You were never meant to live in environments that require nothing from you. Your spirit longs to be expanded. Your gifts are restless for new expression. Your calling demands more room than comfort is willing to give. That's why doors will close. That's why things that once satisfied will no longer feel enough. That's why you'll wake up one day and say, there has to be more. That's not you being ungrateful. That's purpose knocking at the door of your comfort zone saying, it's time to stretch. Stretching doesn't mean chaos. It doesn't mean everything falls apart. It means everything begins to shift. You start having conversations you once avoided. You start walking through doors you used to be too afraid to open. You start making decisions based on vision, not fear. And the more you stretch, the more you realize how much you've been carrying that no longer serves you. Old excuses start falling off. Old mindsets start getting exposed. Old patterns start to feel tight, like clothes that no longer fit. Because when you stretch, the old can't stay intact. The stretch teaches you to trust what you cannot see yet. It teaches you to lean on God in deeper ways, to rely on faith, not formulas. It teaches you that obedience often precedes clarity, that sometimes you have to walk even when the path isn't fully lit, because your growth isn't waiting on comfort, it's waiting on your courage. The stretch calls you out of the small space where fear kept you boxed in and invites you into wide open territory. Not because it's easy, but because that's where your next level is located. Every person who has ever stepped into their purpose has had to stretch. They've had to push past rejection, push past disappointment, push past the opinions of others. They've had to believe in the unseen, invest in the unfamiliar, and keep walking even when their knees were shaking. They understood that staying where it's comfortable would cost them what's possible. And they made a decision not to be perfect, but to be willing. Willing to stretch their faith, their mindset, their expectations. Willing to be reshaped, redefined, and refined by the process of growth. Because the truth is, you'll never know how strong you are until life stretches you. You'll never discover the depths of your calling until you go beyond what's comfortable. Comfort will lull you to sleep, but growth will wake something up inside you that's been waiting for far too long. Your future is too important to be held hostage by your past. There is a calling on your life that doesn't consult where you've been, it speaks to where you're going. But so often we allow old wounds, past mistakes, and familiar failures to write the script for our future. We keep rehearsing moments that are already over, dragging yesterday into today, and wondering why tomorrow still feels out of reach. You can't step into divine purpose while staying loyal to past pain. The past may explain you, but it cannot define you unless you give it permission. There is more in front of you than behind you, but you must stop building your identity around things that were only meant to be lessons. People carry the weight of what they couldn't change, what they wish they had done differently, the opportunities they missed, the words they should or shouldn't have said. And over time, that weight becomes part of their belief system. It begins to whisper, "You'll never get past this," or "This disqualifies you." But the truth is, your past isn't your prison, it's your platform. Every trial, every tear, every setback has the potential to shape you, not shame you. But you have to decide to stop letting it lead. You can't let an outdated version of yourself hold the pen while God is trying to write a new chapter. The future He has for you is filled with purpose, with joy, with impact, but you'll never experience it fully if you keep living in reverse. So many of us are afraid to let go of the past because even though it hurt, it's familiar. We replay stories that no longer serve us because they're known, and what's known feels safe. But growth doesn't happen in the known. Destiny doesn't emerge in safety. Sometimes the greatest act of faith is refusing to stay tied to what broke you. Refusing to keep sitting in chapters where your spirit stopped growing. You have to make peace with what you didn't get, who didn't see you, and what didn't work out. You have to choose forgiveness, not because they deserve it, but because you deserve freedom. You have to grieve what was and then rise toward what can be. When God calls you forward, He's not asking for perfection, He's asking for surrender. He already knew what you walked through. He saw every broken place, every poor decision, every delayed dream. And He still chose you. He still placed greatness in you. He still put a future in front of you that is not dependent on your past but defined by your obedience. But you can't hold a sword in one hand and chains in the other. You can't build what's next while still nursing what was lost. Your hands must be free. Your mind must be renewed. Your spirit must be open to the fact that what God has ahead is not limited by what happened behind. Sometimes we allow our environment to reinforce our past. We stay in circles that keep reminding us of who we were instead of calling us into who we're becoming. We surround ourselves with people who see us through the lens of history, not destiny. And that reinforcement becomes a cage. That's why you have to be intentional about where you go, what you listen to, and who you allow to speak into your life. You can't afford to give energy to voices that echo your fears instead of amplifying your faith. The future requires a new sound. It requires new language. You have to stop saying, "This always happens to me," and start declaring something new is being birthed in me. You have to stop saying, "That's just who I am," and start declaring, "I'm becoming who I was created to be." It's time to start looking ahead with expectation instead of behind with regret. What didn't work out was never meant to define you. What they said about you isn't the final word. What you lost doesn't compare to what you're about to gain. But if your mind is still chained to history, your feet will never move toward destiny. You'll sit in rooms meant to elevate you and talk yourself out of the opportunity. You'll sabotage relationships sent to heal you because you still believe you're not worthy. You'll hide your gifts when the world needs your voice. And all of that will have nothing to do with your ability, but everything to do with your alignment. Your future is too important to be filtered through the pain of your past. Too important to be delayed by what didn't go right. Too important to be buried under the weight of shame or guilt. The enemy knows he can't take your future, so he tries to trap your mind in the past. But you have the authority to say no more. You have the power to rise, to rebuild, to move forward, not because of your strength, but because of God's grace. That grace makes all things new, including you. And if you're willing to believe that your story isn't over, if you're willing to release what's behind you, the future waiting for you will be more than you could ask or imagine. God won't elevate what you're unwilling to let go of. Sometimes we pray for promotion, we ask for breakthrough, we cry out for new levels, but deep down we're still clinging to things that no longer serve our purpose. You can't step into the next chapter of your life while holding on to pages that were never meant to go with you. Elevation always requires separation. There are habits, relationships, attitudes, and thought patterns that may have been part of your survival, but they were never meant to be part of your destiny. And the longer you hold on, the heavier the climb becomes. God is a God of increase, but He's also a God of pruning. He removes what doesn't bear fruit so you can grow stronger and higher. Sometimes we don't recognize that the very thing we're clutching is what's keeping us grounded. We say we're ready to fly, but we won't release the weights tied to our wings. Maybe it's an old mindset that says you're not good enough. Maybe it's a relationship that drains your energy. Maybe it's a comfort zone that's become a cage. Whatever it is, if God is asking you to let go, it's because He's making room for something greater. We often want elevation without elimination. We want the blessing but not the shedding. We want the reward without the release. But that's not how growth works. Every level you ascend to demands a lighter load. Think of a hot air balloon. It can't rise until the sandbags are thrown overboard. You are no different. There are things you've carried out of habit, out of fear, out of familiarity, but now God is saying release it. Not because He's trying to punish you, but because He knows what's ahead of you needs space to breathe. The new thing He's preparing for you can't fit in a life that's still crowded with the old. Letting go isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's the decision to stop texting someone who keeps pulling you backward. Sometimes it's choosing to speak differently about yourself. Sometimes it's ending the internal dialogue that tells you you're unqualified. It's the little choices, the subtle shifts in obedience that create massive momentum over time. You may not see the change right away, but heaven takes notice every time you release what God never asked you to carry. And when He sees you let go in faith, He begins to open doors that were previously locked. He begins to align resources, send divine connections, bring fresh vision. Not because the timing suddenly changed, but because your willingness finally did. The challenge is that we often tie our identity to what God is trying to remove. We say, but this is who I've always been. We confuse what's familiar with what's faithful. And we think that if we let go of this version of ourselves, we'll lose everything. But God is not in the business of subtraction, He's in the business of transformation. When He asks you to release something, it's not because He wants less for you, it's because He wants more through you. There is a greater version of you waiting on the other side of your willingness to surrender. You don't need to have it all figured out. You just need to be willing to walk away from what's keeping you stagnant, willing to trust that if God is asking you to leave it, He already has something better prepared, willing to step into the unfamiliar, even if it scares you. Because that's where faith lives, in the in-between, in the space between what you let go of and what hasn't yet arrived. And in that space, your character is refined, your perspective is sharpened, your roots grow deeper. That's where God develops the strength required for your next assignment. Elevation is not just about going higher, it's about becoming lighter. It's about shedding layers that have kept you small, silent, or stuck. It's about looking at the things you've tolerated and realizing they no longer align with where you're headed. Some things aren't sinful, they're just seasonal. Some people aren't toxic. They're just not meant to go with you into your future. And if you try to take everything with you, you'll sabotage your own acceleration. What you refuse to let go becomes the ceiling over your life. It becomes the lid on your potential. But the moment you open your hands and say, God, I trust you more than I trust this, something shifts. The ceiling breaks, the limitations lift, the atmosphere changes, because now God sees a heart ready for more. Not just ready for blessings, but ready for stewardship. Not just ready for recognition, but ready for responsibility. And He knows that the version of you that's willing to release the old is the same version He can trust with the new. The pain of discipline is temporary, but the reward of purpose is eternal. In a world that glorifies instant gratification, it's easy to avoid discomfort, to choose what feels good now over what will bring fulfillment later. But if you want to grow into the person you were created to be, you must be willing to embrace the process. Discipline isn't punishment, it's preparation. It's not about restriction, it's about alignment. Discipline trains your spirit to rise above emotion, to act according to vision rather than impulse. It sharpens your focus, strengthens your character, and teaches you to keep moving forward even when motivation fades. There will be moments when you don't feel like doing the work, times when no one's watching, when the applause has stopped, when the path feels long and progress seems invisible. That's where discipline becomes your anchor. It holds you steady when your feelings try to sway you. It reminds you that greatness is not built on feelings, it's built on faithfulness. The daily choice is to show up, to stay committed, to keep believing when nothing has changed. Yet those are the moments that define your legacy, because every time you choose discipline over distraction, you're investing in the future version of yourself that's waiting to emerge. Too often we think passion alone will carry us to our purpose, but passion can fade. Emotions shift, excitement wears off. Discipline is what keeps the flame alive when the fire dies down. It's what pushes you to wake up early when comfort tells you to sleep in. It's what gets you back up after failure, because you're not chasing approval, you're anchored in assignment. Discipline is what makes you say, I may not see the full picture, but I trust the process enough to keep moving. And that process, while painful at times, is never wasted. Every early morning, every hard choice, every uncomfortable step is a seed planted in faith. And in time, those seeds produce fruit that lasts. Purpose requires preparation. And preparation requires discipline. You can't carry the weight of your calling without the strength that discipline builds. If God gave you everything you're praying for right now, would your habits be able to sustain it? Would your mindset be able to handle it? Would your lifestyle be able to steward it? Sometimes the delay isn't denial, it's development. God is not trying to withhold from you, He's trying to grow you. And the pain of discipline is how that growth happens. It's how you prove to yourself that you're not just dreaming about change, you're becoming the kind of person who can walk in it. There will be days when you question whether it's worth it. Days when discipline feels more like a burden than a blessing. But the alternative, staying the same, shrinking back, repeating old patterns, is far more painful in the long run, because the pain of regret lasts longer than the pain of effort. When you look back, you won't wish you had scrolled more, slept in more, avoided challenges more. You'll wish you had pushed harder, believed deeper, stayed consistent when it was easier to quit. Discipline is hard, but stagnation is harder. And the reward of knowing you didn't give up on your assignment, that you honored your rendezvous, that you grew into the person God created you to be, that reward is eternal. Discipline doesn't make you perfect, it makes you faithful. It doesn't mean you won't stumble or fall. It means you've decided in advance that quitting is not an option. It's a mindset, a lifestyle, a decision to show up even when no one claps. Even when you're tired, even when it feels like nothing's changing. Because purpose isn't found in the spotlight, it's forged in the shadows. It's shaped in those hidden places where your discipline builds the foundation that your destiny will one day stand on. There is something powerful about choosing discipline in a culture that chooses ease. It sets you apart. It prepares you for opportunities before they arrive. It creates space for God to do more in you so He can do more through you. Because He doesn't just bless talent, He blesses faithfulness. He doesn't just respond to dreams, He responds to diligence. And when He sees you showing up again and again, sowing in the dry seasons, pressing forward, when it doesn't make sense, that's when doors begin to open. That's when favor finds you, not because you chase shortcuts, but because you honor the stretch. You endured the pressure. You submitted to the process, and you discover that discipline doesn't take from you, it refines you, it builds you, it strengthens you for the kind of purpose that lasts for eternity. Every version of you is necessary, but not every version is meant to stay. Life is a series of evolutions, a divine unfolding of who you're meant to become. Each season reveals a layer, exposes a lesson, shapes a new perspective. And every version of you along the way served a purpose. The one who survived heartbreak, the one who settled for less, the one who doubted, feared, hid, the one who kept going even when everything inside was breaking. You needed those versions. They taught you resilience. They showed you your strength. They proved that even in the dark, your soul kept breathing. But now the grace for that version is lifting. That chapter is closing. And who you were is not who you are being called to be. There's a danger in confusing familiarity with destiny. You can grow so accustomed to an outdated identity that it feels like truth, even when it's keeping you small. You say, this is just who I am, but that's not who you're becoming. God never intended for you to remain in the same mindset, the same habits, same emotional patterns. What served you in survival mode won't serve you in purpose mode. And if you're not careful, you'll start worshiping a former version of yourself because it's safe. You'll stay loyal to old limitations because they're predictable. But the calling on your life requires you to let go of comfort and embrace transformation. Transformation doesn't come by accident. It comes by choice. It comes when you stop resisting the pull to grow. When you stop rehearsing your old story and start writing a new one. Growth means grieving old identities. It means honoring them without idolizing them. That past version of you got you here, but it can't take you there. It was never meant to. It was the foundation, not the finish line. And the longer you hold on to who you were, the more you delay who you're supposed to become. There will be moments when you feel the tension between the old and the new. That space in between where you're not quite who you were, but not yet who you're becoming. That space is sacred. It's where real transformation takes place. The old version of you will try to pull you back. It will remind you of your failures, your flaws, your fears. It will use the familiar to seduce you into playing small again. But you have to learn how to bless that old version and still walk away. You have to say, thank you for getting me here, but I'm no longer available for that kind of thinking, that kind of living, that kind of settling. Stepping into the new requires shedding. It requires letting go of the narratives that said you weren't good enough. It means no longer identifying with the wounds that once defined you. It means making room for the healed version of you to rise. And that can feel scary, because when you've been broken for so long, healing feels like unfamiliar ground. When you've been overlooked for so long, being seen can feel overwhelming. But this next level of your life will not be built by the broken version of you. It will be built by the whole version, the brave version, the obedient version, the one who stopped waiting for validation and started living from vision. You don't have to hate your old self to outgrow it. You just have to recognize that it was part of the process, not the promise. Growth is not about shame, it's about release. It's about releasing outdated versions of yourself so you can make room for new wisdom, new strength, new purpose. And that's not betrayal, that's alignment. That's obedience to the unfolding work of God within you. Every level of your life demands a deeper level of surrender, a deeper level of identity. And identity is not something you find, it's something you uncover. It's been there all along, buried beneath the versions you thought you had to be to survive. God never designed you to stay the same. He built you with layers, with capacity, with calling. That's why you feel the tension. That's why what once excited you now feels too small. That's why you can't rest in yesterday's wins. Because there's more. And that more won't come through striving, it will come through shedding. Through allowing the old to fall away so the new can rise. Through choosing to grow, even when it costs you the familiarity of who you were. You may not see it all clearly yet, but something in you knows it's time. Time to stop answering to the voice of who you used to be. Time to start aligning with the voice of who God is calling you to become. Time to step out of the old costume and walk in the authority of the new creation being formed in you.